Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we would do our next installment of a mixed haul, which involves mostly movies and a couple of books, and it should be interesting. It's not a big one. I have some stuff for from Christmas that I got for Christmas, and some other items, and I thought we'd go through it and have some fun with it. All right, and so let's start with the books. Let's do that first, and then we'll move on to all the movies. All right. So first up is one of the great, one of the first novels ever in the English language, Robinson Crusoe. All right, and this is by Daniel Defoe, and it basically tells the story of Robinson Crusoe, who ends up being stranded on a tropical island, for like 3 decades, something like that, around 3 decades. And his adventure on that island with smugglers and criminals and natives and everything else. So it's quite an interesting read. And some people argue it's the first English novel, but there's a whole bunch of English novels that could be considered the first, right? And this is basically an Oxford World classic in the latest edition of it, all right? And these ones sell pretty easily. So I've already read this book. I have it in a Franklin Library leatherbound edition. If you know me and you've watched my previous videos, you know that I'll collect a nice edition of a book that I really enjoyed reading as a keepsake. And usually it's either a Franklin Library leatherbound and an Easton Press leatherbound or a Folio Society hardcover box book that has a slipcover, cardboard slipcover on it. They're really nice as well. Um, and those are the ones that I collect. And I have that. I have a Franklin of this, so I don't need this. But anytime I come across when I'm going searching for stuff to add to my library, um, when I find stuff that I can resell, um, I'll pick it up. I found this for $2, and I'll probably sell it for like $6 or $7. All right. So that's uh, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. And the second and last book, all right, is not a lot of room because I have a lot of. Anyway, so we'll move it over here. Uh, Next up is a short story by Herman Melville called Bartleby, the Scrivener, if I'm pronouncing that right, ignorant intellectual, is a person who copies, right? These are back in the days where people didn't have typewriters or computers, so they manually copied. They're either copying from a person's dictation or they're copying from another book. And this person works in a lawyer's office, so he's copying, like court transcripts and things like that, because you can't keep them around, right? So you need to make copies of them if you want to keep a copy in your office, because anyways, there is a reason for people copying things, because like, you can't keep the originals of them, right? So anyway, so this is about Bartleby, who works in a law office, and it's one of Melville's greatest short stories. All right, everybody knows Melville for Moby Dick, but around that time that he was writing Moby Dick, he also wrote this short story, and this is basically a story about depression and frustration, really, because this guy goes in, he gets hired by a lawyer in this law firm, and at the beginning he's doing all this work, scribing or whatever, right? And then he decides he doesn't want to do it anymore, right? So he basically sits in the office and looks out the window at a brick wall, and stops working, and it goes from there. It's kind of interesting, how difficult it is sometimes to let people go that aren't doing their jobs just because you're a human, right? And it's a really cold thing to do, knowing that you're making somebody unemployed, right? But anyways, it touches on that as well. It's a really good short story, but I picked it up because um, I can resell it at a reasonable cost, higher than I bought it for, which always gives me money that I can buy the things that I want to buy, right? So which usually involves movies most of the time. All right, so um, next up, let's do the movies. All right, so first, um, I was out at my, I was out doing a thrift store visit, and I mentioned before there was a used record store, not my favorite record store that's downtown in the city that I live in, but in the West End. There's a street in the West End in my city where it has a pawn shop, one, two, three, three thrift stores, a used bookstore, um, and a used record store. No, four thrift shops. And so what I do is I'll go every few weeks or whatever. I'll go onto that street and I'll just nail all of them, go through all of them, right? This time I didn't get to all of them. I only got to the used record store and one of the thrift stores, and then I had to go pick up my wife, so I didn't have time to visit all of them. But while I was there, in the used record store, which also sells, DVDs and Blu-rays and, cassettes and records and CDs and, all the different types of media. The problem with that one, as I mentioned before, is that they charge way too much for stuff. Um, but I will go in there and I will make some purchases. I I sold a bunch of stuff a few weeks back, and I still got a bunch of that money um, left that I can use to get stuff that I want, right? And one of the movies that I wanted, I have on DVD, but they had it in there new on Blu-ray for $20. So that's not bad, and it's Ichi the Killer. I don't know if you've seen this movie or not, but it's an eye-opening movie if you haven't seen this movie. It's a pretty brutal movie as well. And it's a Japanese film. It came out in 2001. It's directed by Takeshi Miike, all right? And he started directing major films back in the early 90s. Um, and he became a favorite director of mine because his films are just out of the ordinary, right? He's got a very interesting sense of humor and twisted mind because he combines his sense of humor with his twisted mind. And this is the perfect example of that. Basically, this is a story of rival Yakuza gangs in Tokyo, in Japan, or whatever, right? And it can get you, there's torture scenes in it and everything. It's pretty brutal stuff. Um, but it's quite an impressive film as well. It has one of the most memorable characters um, I've ever seen in film, and it's actually based on a manga. I wrote down the who was it? Hideo Yamamoto's manga series. All right, it was also called Ichi, right? Um, so it was based on the manga series. But Miike is probably the most prolific um, Japanese director of all time. And if you ever come across any of his films, especially his films in the 90s and early 2000s, don't miss the opportunity to grab them because they're out of the ordinary. At least they're out of, like, when you watch one of his films, you won't forget that film. Even if you liked it or didn't like it, you won't forget it. All right. And this one is probably his most famous film. And basically, this character is the character I'm talking about. That is one of the most memorable characters uh, I've ever seen in film. And his name in the film is, what's his name? It's always, it's not Ichi. Ichi is another guy. Um, he's uh, he's like a Yakuza enforcer. And his name is Kakihara. And basically, what makes him memorable is he really enjoys to torture people. Number one, but number two, he's a bit of a masochist himself. Is a masochist or a sadist? Anyways, what he did was he took razor blades and he basically cut his lip here, like his cheek up to here, and cut his cheek up to here, and then he takes a safety pin and puts it in each side so that it's still attached. And what he does is he smokes. And when he smokes, he'll keep his mouth closed. When he blows out, the smoke comes out his cheeks rather than out of his mouth. And it makes him look like a dragon, right? So that's the reason why he did it. He wanted to look like a dragon or whatever, right? So um, that was a pretty memorable scene when he did that. And well, the whole thing is pretty brutal stuff. But anyway, so uh, if you don't have a weak stomach and you want to watch something that's pretty friggin' interesting, and you won't come across it very often, pick up this film. I paid more than $20 with tax for it, just because I have it on a crappy DVD um, copy of it, and so now I have it on Blu-ray and I can watch it, and at least it'll be nice to watch or whatever, right? So, um, other of his films, there's so many. Like he will direct like 4 films a year, sometimes 5 films a year. So like he started in 1991 and he's directed over 100 films. And every time I come across any of his films, I'll pick it up automatically. I've got maybe 5 or 6 of his films, but the film that I'm most looking for, I haven't been able to find, is called The Happiness of the, what's the last name? The Katakuris. The Happiness of the Katakuris. And that is a friggin' hilarious film, all right? It's a bit sick as well, but it's a hilarious film. It's basically about this couple who buys a hotel because supposedly they're building a highway going through where this hotel is, and uh, the husband thinks that it'll make a ton of money, so he buys it. But then the government ends up changing where they're going to build the highway, and now they hardly get any guests, and they find out that the hotel is a bit cursed, right? So and it leads to some interesting things happening in it. The scene with the married couple involving a sumo wrestler is friggin' hilarious. Anyways, even though it's kind of brutal, but it made me laugh out loud when I saw that. I'm going, what? No way. Anyway, so um, if you haven't watched anything by Takeshi and Miike, pick some stuff up and watch them. Let me know what you think. Maybe leave it in the comments if you've watched some of his films. What do you think of them? Like the 2 most modern directors in Japan that I really enjoy is him, and they're both Takeshi, right? Takeshi Miike and Takeshi Kitano is another guy, right? His stuff, he's an actor and a director as well. So his stuff is really good as well, especially his Ichi film, and there's another film. What is it called? I keep forgetting it. I'll put it up here. It has to do with color, and it's up there with the greatest cinematography films of all time. I watched that film and I was just blown away by the cinematography, right? So anyway, so that's Takeshi Miike with Ichi the Killer, came out in 2001, based on the Magna series of books of the same name. All right, so that's the first one. The second one is this I got as a Christmas present. All right, and this is a Scottish film. All right, and it's called Gregory's Girl. And could I find this on DVD? I could not. Could I find it anywhere? No, I've been collecting movies like seriously collecting movies for the last maybe 5 years or so. Um, and this is one of my all-time favorite films. I could not find it anywhere. So with your all-time, it seems a lot of my all-time favorite films are films that are just really hard to find, right? So I end up having to buy them new. But at least this one I got it as a Christmas present. And it's basically, it's like a coming-of-age romantic comedy where he really likes her. So he gets the courage up to ask her, all right, and her name is Dorothy, ask her out on a date, and she accepts. But when she accepts the date, she doesn't show up for it. And the reason why she accepts the date was because of a friend of hers, all right? And basically what happens is these group of friends who are girls basically tag team him on the date. So basically, I don't mean in a sexual manner. What I mean by he shows up for his date and she isn't there, but her friend is there to tell him that she isn't there, and then she, says, "Come with me," and grabs his arm, and then they go to a chip truck and have some French fries or whatever, and then she kind of passes him off to another girl, who passes him off to another girl, to get to the girl who ends up liking him. All right, so there's a girl in school that really likes him, who's friends with the girl that he likes. And basically, it's it's really sweet. It's a really sweet film. It's really, I mean, you're gonna feel really like joy watching this film. It's really joyous, and it is funny as well. But it's really joyous. It's all about that period of time in high school where you're not really comfortable with the opposite sex, but you're blooming, let's say, and the awkwardness of all that is quite humorous to people who have already been through it, right? So it's not so much fun when you're going through it, but you look back on it and it's humorous, right? So, and it captures the essence of that feeling of youth and uncomfortability when it comes to, the opposite sex or love or attraction or whatever, right? Infatuation, that kind of thing. But basically, these four girls basically team up to get Gregory, who's the main character, to the girl that likes him the most. And then he's just flattered that a girl likes him, you know what I mean? That kind of thing, right? So, and that's kind of how it's kind of a bigger picture of how it actually works. Because, so many men think that they're the ones that have control in a relationship, right? But just because you're the one that is, forced to ask or to pursue or whatever, right? Although less of it's being done today, it seems. Um, doesn't mean you're the one that has the control, right? Even though you're the man and you're supposed to lead or whatever, quote unquote, in the traditional way or whatever. It's the women that have control, right? They're the ones that have the ability to say no, unless and there's nothing really you can do about it. So uh, so that humility or that humbleness is a good um, thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're looking for a girlfriend or whatever, right? So keep it in your head that in the end she's the one that has the choice, not you, right? So you can only give her the opportunity to make that choice, right? So anyway, so um, this is an extremely good film, all right, and it came out in 1980. And if you ever come across this film, pick it up and watch it. It's a beautiful film, all right, and it's simple. It's not a complicated film. It's a simple film, and it's just full of joy, right? And those type of films are few and far between, right? So that's Gregory's Girl, all right. Um, Next up is another one I got for Christmas, and this is Catch Me If You Can on Steelbook. Really nice Steelbook. Um, this is a Steven Spielberg film directed by Steven Spielberg. Came out in 2002, and it stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Basically, it's based on the book by, I wrote it down because I knew I wouldn't remember it. His name is Frank Abagnale Jr. Abagnale, and basically he was a teenager or a young adult, and he um, basically went around uh, being an imposter, a pilot, a doctor, and he was still in high school and he was passing himself off as a pilot, passing himself off as a doctor, and the Leonardo DiCaprio is a person who plays him in the film, and Tom Hanks plays the FBI agent going after him, right? So um, it's quite funny and it's also entertaining, and Spielberg did it, so it's hard to find a film without some merit that's directed by Steven Spielberg, correct? And this it's a really nice steelbook as well. So and I got it for Christmas, so I'm quite happy about that. All right, so that's Catch Me If You Can. Next up after that is a DVD of a 1943 film. It's an American drama called Watch the Rhine, and stars Bette Davis. All right, and Paul Lucas. Paul Lucas won the Academy Award that year for Best Actor in this film. But this was part of a. This takes place during the 1940s, during the rise of Nazism, right? And that basically runs through the whole plot of this film. But the main reason why I looked for, and this is another Christmas present that I got, was because okay, so a little bit of explanation from here on in. Okay, so I've mentioned in many of my videos previously, I may have had about between 2,000 and 3,000 films, and then there was a gentleman who was selling a very large collection of films, and what he did was he put on a Facebook Marketplace a picture of a half-size bookshelf, right? And it maybe had 100 movies in it, and basically of those 100, probably 40 of them were Criterion Collection films, or like classic films, Blu-rays and DVDs. Kino Lorber stuff, a lot of British stuff like the Eureka's Masters of Cinema and the Indicator films. These ones, these European British films. Uh, you know, uh, Labels or whatever, right? So, and I looked at it and I went, and he wanted $40 for it. And I went, $40 for that? That must be a typo or whatever. So, anyways, I text him, and actually, that ad was sent to me by a fellow collector who um, he lives outside of where my city is, and the drive to go pick that type of stuff up was too far for him. He didn't want to bother with it, so he pointed me to the ad, and then I looked at it and I went, "Wow, that is a that's a lot of really good films for such a cheap price." So I sent the guy a text, and he said, "Yeah," and I said, "Can I come over and see them?" And he said, "Sure." So I went over and saw it, and basically that was just basically a teaser ad, and what he showed me was a dining room and a living room just full of movies. All right, there must have been around 2,000 movies, and he had removed most of them and put them in boxes, and he was selling them. And the reason why he was selling them was because he wanted to sell the house that the house was in, and he couldn't sell it with all the stuff in it, right? He wanted to empty out the house to have it for showing and clean it up, right? So vacuum the carpets, clean the carpets, paint, and all that kind of thing. And he couldn't do it with all the stuff. And I mean, there was movies in there. There was he had a whole wall of opera and classical music on CD. He had a bunch of books as well. Anyways, but I was more interested in the movies. And so basically, I bought the whole collection of around 2,000 films for like $600. And well, 640, including 40 originally that I bought, that half bookshelf, bookcase full of stuff, right? Anyways, it was around between 1,500 and 2,000 movies, and my collection went from maybe 3,000 to 5,000 films, right? And basically, the person was really, really into early cinema. He had stuff, like early animation, um, early films from the 1910s, the Buster Keaton, uh, really early stuff, all the way up to like the 1960s. But the 1950s to the 1910s to the 1950s, it was like he was a history buff for film, right? And it didn't matter where he could find, he wanted to find these movies. I would assume this is the feeling I got when I went through the whole collection when I finally had it back here at my place, right? It was like he was going through the history of cinema right from the beginning forward, right? With a concentration on, um, well, not like, I don't know if you call it concentration, but it included European cinema, French cinema, German cinema, Japanese cinema, um, British cinema, and American cinema. Not much Canadian stuff though. There was a few things, Canadian stuff, but anyway, so he ran the gambit. It was all on Blu-ray or DVD, and some of the stuff was quite expensive. So just as an example, he had over just under 400 Criterion Collection films, either on Blu-ray or DVD, and around 200 Masters of Cinema from Eureka, and maybe just under 100 Indicator films. He had a whole bunch of of Kino Lorber films. Basically, all the dramas, all the film noirs. I mean, he had over 200 films um, just on film noir. Um, uh, all the older horror and science fiction films, from the 30s, 40s, 50s, that kind of thing. Um, Anyways, it was a great library. Now, a lot of it is Region Two or Region B stuff, so I need to get a region free Blu-ray player to play it. But what I do is I basically transfer it onto my computer, and then I can watch it with VLC Media Player, right? So, and I'm slowly going through it all. But okay, so the main point of me doing that is because here's and a lot of the stuff, he had a lot of box sets of early cinema. Here's a perfect example of one, and this is the Bette Davis collection on DVD. This is volume 3, so there's 2 volumes before this. I have those 2 volumes as well. But the problem with this one now, when the gentleman boxed up all of his stuff, he gave me everything, but some of the stuff that he had would be missing a DVD, or or maybe it was uh, a nice Criterion box set or whatever, but it's missing the book, that kind of thing. There were a few of them, not a lot, maybe about 20 to 25. That would be a box set of some sort that might be missing a DVD or a movie in it, or it might be missing, the book of it. All right, so this one was missing one of the films. All right, so what I did was so that so if you get a box collection, you don't want to get rid of the box, and you have all the films. Um, don't leave it like that with the missing one out of it, because what will happen is this cardboard will bend in and it'll break, and things will rip and everything else. So what you do is you just take an empty DVD case and put it in to replace it. That way, if you don't want to get rid of the box set itself, you still have it so that it doesn't squish or whatever, right? So it's just a little secret. So what I did was I put on my Christmas list the missing film that I didn't have from this collection, and that film was this one. All right. So I got it for Christmas. So now what I can do is I can take the empty DVD case out, and I can put the film in, and it's the exact same film that's supposed to be in there. So it's not like a different version of it, because I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's the front cover of the film, and look, it looks exactly like this one. Although for some reason they ripped this ad thing off of it. Anyway, um, so now I can put it in like that. Now I have the complete box set again. All right, so that's what I did with Christmas List, because this film, because it's mostly out of print, I think, or it's really hard to find. I found it on Amazon, but they wanted like over $20 for it, and I went, yeah, I can't do that. But maybe somebody will buy it for me for Christmas, so I put it on my list, and I did. I got it for Christmas, all right. So now the volume 3 of the Bette Davis collection I have full again, right? Okay, so that's that film. After that, um, another Christmas present was okay. So Universal is synonymous with the old horror films, the monsters, right? So one of one of the one of the main things that people collect for that, I think it's been expanded into Blu-ray, but these original DVDs, right? Um, so you have, it's called the Legacy Collection of the Universal horror films, right? And the main 5 characters in the old Universal films, that ran from like the 1930s to the 1950s, um, is the Wolfman, all right, Frankenstein, all right, the Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Dracula, and less so the Invisible Man. I think there's an Invisible Man one as well. Is there? I don't know. I'd have to look, and I think I have it. Anyway, it's either 5 or 6 volumes of the main characters in the Universal horror um, film genre. But it didn't stop there. And what Scream Factory did back in 2019 was they came out with like 6 volumes of other films that aren't on these 5 or 6 characters, right? But the other Universal horror films that Universal put out during that time as well, right? So there's a bunch of them, and they made 6 volumes. Screen Factory made 6 volumes of it, right? So they look like this, right? Right. So it's a volume, and it has four films on it in Blu-ray. I think this also came out in DVD. But in this gentleman's collection, he had this, but he was missing that one Bette Davis film. So now I found it. And in this one, he had these. All right. You had volume one. All right. Volume two. Each has 4 films. All right. Um, volume three. Okay. Volume four. All right. And volume six. All right. So in all those boxes, because the amount of boxes that I took from him, it filled up my SUV 3 times. I filled up the front seat, I filled up all of the back seat, and I filled up the trunk area 3 times to get all the boxes of all these films back to my place from his place, right? And in one of the boxes had these 5 volumes of the Universal Horror Collection on Blu-ray, put out by Scream Factory, right? So, but he was missing volume 5, and then I looked up how much volume 5 was, and they're all going for like $50 or $60, American, well, Canadian or whatever. So after tax, it'd be over $60 for 4 movies. You know what I mean? And these aren't like recent movies. They're not popular movies. They're not The Wolfman or they're not Frankenstein films. They're the other films that Universal put out, and Screen Factory was like asking like $50, $60 for each one of those. It's a bit much. So I didn't want to buy it, but I wanted to complete this collection. So I put it on my Christmas list, and lo and behold, I got volume 5 for Christmas. All right. So now I have all 6 of the volumes. So that's cool. So basically, I have all 6 of the volumes on Blu-ray of the off main films from Universal. And then I have all the main films um, by Universal on DVD. But then, as another example of something that's missing, so he was missing volume 5 on this. He also had this collection in it. See, what he did was he was upgrading his collection. You could tell because I would find copies of films that he had on DVD, and I would find copies of the same film on Blu-ray. So what he was doing was he was upgrading as he was going along, right? And basically the upgrade for these ones, if you want the main ones from this, so for example, this one has um, Dracula's Daughter, Son of Dracula, and House of Dracula, um, right? But the original one is the Dracula film, right? So it has the Dracula, but then it has all the films involving Dracula that Universal put out afterwards, right? Same with the Creature from the Black Lagoon or Frankenstein or whatever, right? So, but basically, there's an essential collection of the main films of the main characters, their first films, and not like sequels to them, right? And what happened is Universal put out a box set. All right, it's called the Essential Collection on Blu-ray. All right, so basically this has Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, the Bride of Frankenstein, the Wolf Man, Phantom of the Opera, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. All right, so it has 8 films. All right, 8 of the original films on Blu-ray. So he basically was upgrading these ones um, because these ones I got from his collection as well. I actually had two of the 5 or 6 of these ones already in my collection, but anyways, um, uh, upgraded it to this. All right, but you look at it, and there's something missing in it, right? There was a booklet that came in it, and this booklet is not in this set. All right, so it has the postcards, it has all the films. This box part of the has all the films, but it doesn't have the booklet to it, so it's kind of depressing. So even though I got like 400 Criterion, I'm going, wow, that's a lot. And box sets, the Eclipse series, I have a whole bunch of Eclipse from Criterion as well, and just a whole bunch of really nice box sets as well. But about 20 to 25 of them were missing something from it, right? So I'm slowly trying to replace it. So the problem is if it's a film that I'm like this is a bit easier to replace. You can just get that film, right? Look for that film and replace it. But who is going to be selling, just the booklet for this collection, right? Nobody is going to be selling just the booklet for it, right? So I'm probably never going to be able to get the booklet to add to this collection. So this collection will always be incomplete. It has all the films on Blu-ray, but it's missing that booklet, which is kind of like a little bit of an irritant. Same as um, another one that he had was, the complete Zatoichi, the original Zatoichi films. All the films, came in a really colorful. I'll show it here. I have it over there. I just don't want to get up and go get it. Um, and Criterion put out a really nice box set of all the Zatoichi films, right? And it comes with a thick booklet, and it doesn't have the thick booklet either. I'm going, that's like, that's out of print now, if I remember correctly, and it's like, $100 or $200, but without that booklet, I don't know how it, you know, it just, bugs me that the box set isn't complete, right? So, like with this one, even if I couldn't find that, say, sixth film or sixth film, I could just take the movies out and get rid of the box and just, you know, treat them as individual films. They don't really need to be in this box set, right? A lot of the box sets that studios sell are just like a compilation of all these movies, right? A Humphrey Bogart collection, but you could keep them out of the collection and just put them, you know, I have the temptation of doing that a lot, to take them out of the box set because um, they involve films by certain directors that I collect, and I would rather have that film in the director section of my library rather than in a box set because it's really hard to find films in box sets by actor. You have to remember the actor more than the director, and then you got to remember whether you have a box set of it, and then you got to try to find it, right? So you have it in your collection, but where in your collection, you have to be clairvoyant to find it, right? So if I'm looking for, let's say, Deception, which is a Bette Davis film, right? But let's say I want to watch that film, so I go, I wonder if I have Deception because I like let's say, the director of Deception, and so I look up, on Rate Your Music or the IMDb or whatever to see whether I have it in my collection, and I see that I do have it in my collection. So then I go to that director's section in my film library and it's not there, and I'm going, okay, did I misplace it? And I put it in the film by title, alphabetical by title. So I go over there and look for that film under, a D for Deception, and I look and it's not there either. I'm going, okay, where the fuck is it, right? I want to watch that film, but I can't find it. And then I go, okay, who stars in it? All right, so then I look to see who stars in it. I go, okay, this person stars in it. I go, do I have a box set of them? So then I go looking through all my box sets, or go to that actor section in my film by title. I will also have film by actor in the film by title section. So, like, for example, Cary Grant. I have a box set of Cary Grant. It would be in the G's, right? So then let's say it's Cary Grant is in that. So I'll go to Cary Grant, see if it's in that. It's not in that box set. Then I go, okay, what other actors in this? And then finally you find it maybe, but you might have spent like 10 or 15 minutes looking for it, right? So I am tempted to take, let's say, all of these films out of this box set and put them in individually so I can find them easier. But the problem with that is I've been collecting various things, whether it's books or sports cards or comic books or music or movies or whatever, most of my life. All right. And what I found is, your financial situation, unless you come from money, is never guaranteed, right? So you can lose your job, you can come on hard times, a sickness. If you're in the United States, um, maybe your son gets cancer, all right, and then you're spending hundreds of $1,000s a year on chemo treatment. Do you understand what I mean? So even though I'm not projecting that happening, I may come into some financial difficulties at some point, and maybe I'll need to sell my collection. And it's much easier to sell a really nice box set than it is to sell individual films, right? So I kind of want to keep it in the box set just in case I need to resell it, or maybe I don't like any of these films and I'll just sell it just to get rid of it or whatever, right? Um, so that's why I like to keep the box sets. But for example, this, I would really like to find the booklet that goes into this because then it's complete. And I don't really care about that booklet. I'd like to read it, right? Get that information, the essays or whatever that's in it. But you can get that online as well, right? Um, and I do have all the movies, so that's cool. But if I was ever to resell this, it would be very difficult to resell, or I'd have to sell it really cheaply. Whereas if I had the booklet, I could sell it at a really good price, right? So that's why I like to have everything complete, right? So anyway, so I finally got the fifth volume to complete the six volumes of the Scream Factory Universal Horror Collection from all the Universal films. All right, so that's the Universal Horror Collection. All right, Volume 5 I got for Christmas, and the last but not least, I just picked this one up today for $10, and it's the original Planet of the Apes series of films. There's five of them, right? Um, on Blu-ray. I have them all on DVD in a box set like this, but it's all DVDs. So now I have them all on Blu-ray. But for some reason, he wanted to put stickers on them, so I'm just going to replace all the Blu-rays for these. And if you look at it, here's a perfect example of what I mean. Okay, so here's him not protecting. So if you look at there, see all the damage on that box set? See this is coming apart here, right? And with it missing the book, it's being squished as well. So, and this guy didn't take care of this either, right? So I don't know if you can see that, but when you put it up, look how it sits. It sits sideways because it's all curved because, they didn't make it with the greatest of cardboard. It's not a thick, hard one like you would get maybe in an Arrow video or whatever, right? It's just thin cardboard and it's bent right there. There's nothing you can do about it. So it'll never sit properly. It'll never sit properly anymore. But for $10, get all five films on Blu-ray for $10. You can't beat that. So what I'll do is I'll basically clean it up and I'll put it in a nice plastic bag and it'll look nice again, right? So I'm going to replace all these Blu-rays, get rid of these stickers that are on it, right? So anyway, so if you haven't watched the Planet of the Apes, the first one is extremely good. The Charlton Heston one, where he goes out into space and he comes back to Earth, and now Earth is being run by apes rather than humans and all that. So um, all the films are fun to watch. Even the book, it's a French novel actually, um, is really good to watch. Maybe I should do a film to book comparison because the book is really good too if you haven't read it. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's a uh, it's a good sci-fi book as well, right? So anyway, so that's Planet of the Apes on Blu-ray, all five of the original films, not the three, um, the three ones that came out in the 2000s. Uh, it's just the original five that came out, in the 70s or early 80s or whatever, right? So, all right, so that is everything. All right, I think so. I'm not missing anything, am I? I am not. All right, so perfect. So those are all the stuff that I just got over the last week or so and for Christmas. And I will talk to you in my next video. And if you like this video, leave me a thumbs up if you so choose. Join my channel if you so choose. I would appreciate it. And hope you enjoyed this film. And I will talk to you in my next one. And you have a great day. And bye for now.